Now, this is a kangaroo court. They didn't convene to give Jesus a fair trial. And if you noticed, the high ranking priests are the ones who are running this show, but they're the corrupt ones that Jesus has been calling out to begin with. So you can already tell this is not going to go well for Jesus. If Jesus is really who he says he is, and as people are hearing about how corrupt the priesthood is, well, you can imagine that these guys could lose everything. So you can also imagine that they're going to try and take care of this problem as quickly as they can. Now, the high priest is not named in Mark, but his name is Yosef ben Kepha, or Caiaphas, as he is known in English. But it's really Annas, his father-in-law, who is pulling the strings. And actually, he's been controlling the high priesthood for a while. He was incredibly wealthy and in bed with Roman power, and those two combinations give you the chance to buy the high priesthood, essentially. So lo and behold, the high priests all tend to be related to Annas in one way or another. Now, as an interesting aside, when someone died in the first century, you would first be interned in a tomb. And after a year, and after really your body decays, your bones would be then placed into something called an ossuary, or a bone box. And this particular ossuary was found in 1990, and there's an inscription on it that says none other than Yosef ben Kepha. This is actually the box that contains the actual bones of Caiaphas, the high priest who essentially got Jesus executed. And you can tell how wealthy Caiaphas was because of how ornate this ossuary is. Most of them are pretty drab. They're just a stone box that's made to hold bones. But this one, you can see he's got some really serious wealth in his family. So anyway, back to Jesus' trial before the temple leadership. It's funny that they can't seem to get their stories straight. According to the law, you need two witnesses to agree with each other on the charges. But I guess even though they're trying to trump up some charges, they're not able to get something to stick. But what's interesting is that they're accusing him of blaspheming the temple, even though they can't really agree on anything. And to me, there's some irony or some humor here, because these are the guys who are defending the temple because they're the ones who are probably raking it in because of their association with the temple. But they're convinced that Jesus is the one who has blasphemed the temple, even though they're the ones that are making a killing off of it. And I think that's funny because it's like an ancient case of projection, the phenomena where you start accusing other people of doing the stuff that you are actually guilty of. Do you remember from the last part where the later rabbis would talk about the Messiah coming either riding on the clouds if he found the generation worthy, or riding on a donkey if he found them unworthy? Well, this is why I think that there's some kind of oral tradition surrounding that gets passed down and written down much later, because Jesus specifically says to the high priest that he will be vindicated by saying that you will see me riding on the clouds, which of course he's drawing from some very important Old Testament imagery as well. But I see this all kind of swirling together because Jesus is not only saying that he really is the Son of God, he really is the Messiah, and he's also saying that, hey, you and your generation are evil. You are under judgment. And I will return vindicated riding on the clouds later to some generation that is actually worthy. Well, he's saying this to the highest ranking member of the temple authority. He is prophetically spitting in his face and condemning the temple leadership for being corrupt, for not being who God designed them to be, as they oversaw the place where his presence rested. So they freak out. They lose their minds. Caiaphas tears his clothes, which is a really overly dramatic way of expressing grief and doesn't even make sense in this context necessarily. But then they mock him and they condemn him. And then they turn him over to the guy who actually has the authority to sign his execution.